Hello, everybody, and thanks for joining us this morning. It's our first uh, sort of Galway Chamber event, and because of its Cybersecurity Month, Nostra are delighted to team up with the Chamber to give you this series. So I'm going to put you over to Karen to say a few words on behalf of the Chamber.
Thank you so much. And we're absolutely delighted ourselves to work with Nostra this morning and have this, what we consider to be a really vital conversation on cybersecurity. I think it's fair to say that you're a firm that absolutely understands how pivotal cybersecurity is in the modern business world. And it's not just about technology, it's about how people are working with cybersecurity, the processes, and how the technology can actually work in harmony. Like, I suppose the Chamber really recognises, as the largest business organisation in Galway, we've 500 members, business members across a variety of sectors. Cyber resilience is so important, and it's not something that can just be optional. It really needs to be embedded into the foundations to enable companies to face any potential threats that are out there and enable them to grow as well. So I just want to thank everyone for being here this morning. I think it's an opportunity for us to engage, to have some really meaningful conversation, and to listen and maybe challenge some of the assumptions that we already have around cybersecurity. Sometimes we think small businesses don't necessarily need a huge amount of cybersecurity, but that's where we're wrong, because business resilience is so important. And a small issue for an SME can have far-reaching consequences. Like, we've seen some serious issues along larger companies in the last number of months and years, and the impact that has from a revenue perspective. But that's even more important if you're an SME. So it's a real opportunity to start really looking at your company and where it is from a cybersecurity perspective. And talking to organisations like the Chamber and Nostra to enable you to have the education you need to I suppose, protect your company and thereafter really ensure that you have proper cybersecurity in place. So thank you for coming this morning. That's all I have to say. And just the Chamber is here to support as our Nostra.
Yeah, perfect. Thanks, Karen. So for us ourselves, I suppose one of the biggest things in the IT industry is actually giving people the knowledge, because a lot of the time we get a phone call, unfortunately, and someone has had a cyber attack. And probably one of the biggest things that business owners come back to us and say is, well, you know, we thought we had all of this in place. So a big thing for us is giving people, especially the basics of cybersecurity and how to protect yourself. So I suppose today what I would ask of people joining, no question is a silly question around IT. So if there is a question, put it into the chat and we have Gary who's going to do the presentation. He's CTO here in Nostra. We have also Darren Mooney, who is head of security within Nostra, and myself as a senior account manager located here in Ballybrit. So, as I say, we'd like an interactive session. Please feel free to let us know any questions, and even after the event, we will send on both the presentation and contact details. And as always, I suppose what we'd like to do going forward is provide you with the knowledge and get some value there around making sure that your business is protected from a cybersecurity perspective. So I'm going to hand you over now to Gary, who's going to run through the Cyber Essentials landscape. Thanks.
Thanks, Peter, and thanks people for joining as well. As Peter said, Peter, myself and the guys are based out of Galway here in Ballybrit, so we run the Nostra cybersecurity team, and we delighted to be working with the Chamber on this event. And if there's other cybersecurity asks and wants from the Chamber members, please reach out to the guys, and that we'll cater for those as well. There's absolutely no issue in doing that. So today we're just going to cover the basics of cybersecurity, looking at how things have changed, why cybersecurity has changed over the last year, the last couple of years, and essentially the cybersecurity landscape and the threat landscape has changed quite a bit. The reason for this change is typically it's an evolution of technology. Artificial intelligence and AI is being heavily used at the moment in terms of doing reconnaissance against different systems. And then the biggest issue is global warfare. So anything at a time of unrest between elements going on with Ukraine, Russia, back into the US, Israel, we've never been at a time in my life of more global warfare, distrust. Any time like that, there is a huge amount of advancement in terms of cyber attacks. So cyber is the new playing field for war at the moment. Drones, cyber attacks, espionage, all that stuff that comes out in terms of cyber war comes out in against organizations as well. So, and I know it was mentioned earlier, small businesses are probably one of the biggest targets at the moment as well, because they don't necessarily have the resources to put in play what large organizations would have. But you also have to bear in mind the cost of doing cybersecurity now is much less due to advancements in technology as well. So there is a lot of basics that can be done. Today we're going to cover some of those basics, and today is around educating everybody as well. So things have changed. We would like organizations to change with it, or else they will have some issues, because things have changed. The number of attacks have changed, the frequencies of attacks have changed, and we do work with businesses in Galway when we get calls to assist them in elements of cybersecurity. From a security perspective, and we have a team of security people on today, so if there is any questions, as Peter said, please drop them into the chat. We do stuff from a cybersecurity framework point of view. So these elements is not stuff that's made up by Nostra or other IT organizations. We follow a framework, and following a cybersecurity framework allows organizations to keep up to date with the things they need to do today, but as the framework changes, it allows them to keep up to date. So there is a cybersecurity framework called NIST. It's published on the internet. If you look it up, it's free to use. Quite a lot of information there, but it basically breaks elements down into organizations identifying what's their critical data, where the critical data sits, and managing security through identifying what's critical for that organization. Every organization is different. Some of their data sits on servers, some in the cloud, some on devices, some on factories. So it's every organization under this cybersecurity framework has a starting point of what is critical to my organization, where is my data sits, and then following that critical data to put security controls in place. So protecting those critical data, critical assets, critical people, and making sure all that is protected. If there is an issue, how to detect it quickly before it becomes a problem. If it does become a problem, how do we respond to it? And again, how do we recover from it? And today we'll talk about recovery a little bit, because if we have a good recovery element in place, then we can always recover. And that's the goal. If you walk away from today knowing that you can always recover, that is really good, because we don't want organizations not being able to recover from a cybersecurity attack. If you have a backup in place and it's the same backup that you had 3 years ago, then you're probably not going to be able to recover. And we'll cover that today as well. So NIST cybersecurity framework is a big one. We've got Center for Internet Security, which maps out security recommendations for protecting cloud services. We've got ISO standards, and then we've got certifications like the Cyber Essentials certification out of the UK, which is a real world, fairly simple certification. So that's what we follow. So we don't make it up ourselves. That's the stuff we follow, and that's what we bring to our customers. So Irish businesses have experienced a significant number of attacks in the 12 months, probably the highest on record. Identity is what's being attacked. So your identity is what you use to log on in the morning. So the change from 2020 to 2025 is that COVID was probably the biggest element for digital transformation. A lot of organizations moved to the cloud. Using cloud systems, your identity is at play in terms of cloud. So making sure that cloud services are protected. So your identity is usually your email address. That's what's used to log on to your Office 365, your Gmail, your cloud systems. That's what is being attacked because that's easily available. Because it's in the cloud, it's relatively easy to attack as well. AI assisted attacks is the game changer. So AI is being used to gather information, find vulnerabilities or holes in the software, and then use that and adapt to that fairly quickly. Regulatory requirements are expanding. So we've got NIST 2 for critical infrastructure. It's completely separate to NIST. It's all around protecting critical infrastructure. We got the Cyber Resilience Act for anybody that's producing devices and keeping devices up to date. We've got DORA for financial services customers, and then we've got the GDPR, which is covering everybody, and the security controls around PII and our protected data, which is quite a bit in GDPR alone and making sure that we're GDPR compliant. So the line between IT support, cybersecurity, business continuity is beginning to disappear. They're all becoming one. Zero trust is now a standard security posture. So username and password are no longer enough. So we'll take you through that. And the solution overall is a threefold piece, which is policies, process, and oversight. And we'll dive into that pretty quickly as well. Some of the elements that we on just good security practices, keeping everything up to date, making sure we're migrating to Windows 10 to Windows 11. So if you're running on Windows 10, there'll be no longer security updates there for that. So it's keeping everything up to date and current is a big thing. And that goes from your phone to your devices to firewalls and pretty much everything. The big challenge we have at the moment is keeping the security profile inside and outside the office is the same. So what you don't want is users working from home a couple day or two a week, having loads of protection in the office, and as soon as they go home, that there is no protection. And that means that you have a nice firewall in the office, it's protecting for internet traffic, it's analyzing everything. User works from home 2 days a week, and now they've nothing protecting them. So that piece has to be, and that's a big gift of COVID. So we need to work through that. Identity protection. There's a lot of controls around protecting the identity of organizations, making sure that your username, password, your Office 365 or your G Suite logons are fully protected. There's a list of those. We'll cover those later, but that's the piece where we're kind of looking to work with organizations. And zero trust is moving towards allowing access to users based on a username, password, MFA, and coming from a trusted device. It's no longer just username and password. And then moving security to part of an organization's culture. If we have management needs to drive security, it's a board level responsibility. Some of the new legislations and directives, such as NIST 2, is putting the onus on management and the board level through fines. And same with the GDPR, is making sure that the culture of an organization starts at the top and comes down, keeping everything secure. And it's a challenge sometimes we see, is making sure that security is part of the culture. So 1 week device is a legacy system, 1 week user, 1 week, all it takes is one hole in the fabric for a security incident to occur. I'm going to touch on this a little bit today, but immutable backup. So they mentioned earlier on that if you're on a backup that's 3 years old, it may not be immutable. Immutable means that the backup can't be deleted, removed once it's actually taken. So once a cyber attack happens, there's two things that typically happen. Is once they get access to the systems, they delete the backup. The other piece is that they'll exfiltrate or upload data out of the organization as well. But immutable backup means you can recover. If you don't have immutable backup and you're working off a backup system that's multiple years old, like a Veeam backup or another type of backup that doesn't have immutable built in, that means it can be deleted. We don't want that to happen, because that means you essentially are negotiating with ransomware actors or threat actors to actually get your data back, which is a position that you never want to be in.
Just to add to that, Gary, just sorry that that's what we're seeing in the attacks that we're witnessing. Is the first thing they'll do, just to emphasize the point, they'll go after the backups. So if you don't have something like, as Gary mentioned there, that's immutable, that can't be got to, that's air gapped, that is is really only write and not read only, the bad guys will go after that. So that's something to really pay attention to today, and to ask the question on what backup solution you have in place. Sorry for cutting across you, Gary.
No, you're good, Darren. Please jump in at any point in time. So if there's one takeaway from today, that's definitely number one: immutable backups. And sometimes we can't stress that strong enough, is to make sure that the backups that are in place can't be altered. If the backup is a couple of years old, it probably is not immutable. And keeping everything up to date, this is one of those elements. We mentioned IT policies. So there's a 3-step dance for management of IT. There's a policy. Management of an organization needs to agree how they want to manage IT. There's processes and procedures put in place for those decisions. And then there's oversight to make sure that they're happening. So a policy, very quick document, and we can ask, if you're looking at cyber insurance forms, if you're looking at any basics around IT management, they're going to ask, do you have a policy around information security? That information security policy will cover elements like strength of my passwords, how often I'm doing backups, what endpoint protection do I have on my devices. Lots of stuff. There's about 100 things in there. Fairly straightforward, but it forces the management to make decisions and actually then have process and procedures to make sure they're done, and the ability then to have oversight and reporting of all of that. So that's one of the basic elements of IT structure. IT decisions: how often are we going to replace elements? How often do we do vulnerability scanning? Some of the samples we have here is around backup, network segmentation, permissions and access control, another massive one, making sure we're not over permissions. Security is now moved to the endpoint, so making sure that the policy now has a list of security controls down on the endpoint, so that when we go out of the office, we still have the same security posture as we did in the office, because times have changed. People are accessing their data on mobile phones, they're accessing it on laptops, they're working from home, working for cafes. Security now has to move to the endpoint, and that's just the way things have moved. And keeping everything up to date and making sure that we have monitoring and dashboards then to measure it as we go. I'm going to pop in a couple of questions as we go through it. So having the same security profile inside and outside the office ensures consistent protection regardless of a user location. So I'll throw up a quick poll just to get some responses in terms of this. You're getting asked 4 questions there that will give you a second just to work through, and then we'll give you the answers to them as we go.
Just there, we did get a question in from Kevin. He says, have some people in my org start to use their password manager for MFA codes as it's easier? My understanding is that MFA codes stored with passwords doesn't actually cover multi-factor. MFA on phone is something you have, with the password being something you know. However, MFA stored alongside your password seems to be something you know. Am I right in being suspicious of this?
So you probably are, and it depends on the password manager. So we need to look at what the password manager is as well. So there's some very good password managers, and then there's some that's not so good as well. But we're happy to have a conversation that. So target for cyber criminals then is user credentials. So if identity is what's being attacked, what are they looking for? So essentially they're looking for a single username and password to get into an Office 365 account, a Gmail account, or get access to a machine. So how do they do that? They use phishing emails. 92%, and depending on what you read, between 75% and 92% of cyber attacks start off related to email. And we're going to cover that a little bit today. So what a cyber criminal organization will do, and cyber criminal organizations are split up into different types of organizations. There's one that just get the credentials for getting access to systems, and then they sell those on to people that will actually breach the systems. So the easiest way to get a username and password is to send a phishing link. Someone will click on a link, and we have a schematic, and then they'll give away the username and password without realizing it. The links, and using AI, those phishing emails are a lot more believable than they would be. If somebody can get a phishing link and get into an Office 365 mailbox, there's a lot of stuff they can do there in order to take advantage of that. The other piece, what cyber criminals want to do, is to get access to a machine. If a cyber criminal can get access to a machine in an organization, that means they will probably get access to all machines in that organization by moving laterally across the network. So again, if we have one single point of failure in a organization, or if our security controls are less when working from home, access to one machine can give access to the whole network. Now that's something to do. So one weak point can compromise a full network. Credential stuffing is using lists of usernames and passwords to gain access to multiple accounts, but you can actually target multiple accounts with same passwords. There's man-in-the-middle attack. I'm going to step through that in a second. And then vulnerabilities. If we have vulnerabilities in our systems, then that's just letting them in, especially anything facing the outside world. And everything needs to be kept up to date. So we have firewalls facing the outside world. We need to keep those up to date all the time. Vulnerabilities happen in every system. So when Microsoft and the big security organizations or the big platform organizations write their code, they have a 3 to 4% bad code rate that they accept, because if they try and get 100% good code, it never goes out the door. So software is written with the fact that it is going to have vulnerabilities. All software manufacturers accept vulnerabilities. Some of those vulnerabilities will allow a bad actor or a cyber criminal write a little piece of code, embed it into a script or a website, and take advantage of a vulnerability that can push a backdoor or remote access tool down onto a device. So vulnerabilities on devices, bad. Vulnerabilities on firewalls, even worse. But that's number 5 in order to get in and sometimes it's a combination of all of these. But essentially, cyber criminals are looking to get access to data repositories and systems, and their goal is to extract money out of organizations, and the ultimate goal for them is to do that using ransomware. This is a sample schematic for phishing attack. Attacker sends a phishing email. Somebody on the user working away, busy day, and sometimes they'll send them on a Friday evening, they'll send them on a bank holiday weekend, they'll send them at times when people are trying to get out the door and do stuff. User clicks on the link, they are asked to provide their MFA code. There's a man-in-the-middle attack where it actually takes that MFA code and it captures it, and it actually logs onto their 365, but the user does not know that they've actually been compromised. That actually gives a session token or a token. So the combination username, password, MFA combination gives them a token that allows them to access to your Office 365 account for 90 days, unless security is set up on that tenant to re-ask them to time out those token use and to do that. So MFA on its own is not enough. You have to time them out. And that's why we're moving to zero trust. We would love if this victim had their access to their Office 365 account tied down to that laptop. So if somebody else went and took it, they wouldn't be able to get in. Microsoft are changing that at the moment, but that's the way it has been for the last while. And as soon as Microsoft will make a change in terms of security, cyber criminals will get a workaround for that as well. So if you have strong username plus MFA, which would have been the standard up to now, so strong passwords plus MFA, you would think you would be in a good place. Not necessarily. Some of the new phishing attacks and the phishing kits that are available online will allow cyber criminals bypass this very quickly in a phishing link. Once they get in, they can get access to an Office 365 account. The other flip side of that is that they've sent in a small piece of malware that have got access to a machine, and there's different ways to get in. They can use the 365 account to push more stuff down. If something is left open and they do get in, they will scan the network. If there's a legacy server on the network, an old machine, a Windows 7, probably Windows 10 now shortly when that comes, there's no more security updates for that. But if there's an older server, older machines, they can easily get compromised the network if they get access. So if they do get access, the most access for ransomware attacks in the last year have been compromised VPN or remote access credentials. So Nostra are moving away from VPN as a piece. We're moving towards a technology. So the old-fashioned VPN is gone because it is being compromised. Usernames and passwords for it are being compromised. MFA is being compromised. So the old way of doing remote access is changing, and it's moving towards a new way of cloud secure edge, or just different cloud-based remote access solutions. Once bad actors get in, they will get access to one system. If they get access to one system, they can dump all the credentials that's been logged onto that system for the last while. They can get a password hash, put that into a password cracking tool. If the password is weak, as in less than 8 characters, they'll be able to crack that within a couple of hours, sometimes even minutes if it's very weak. So then once they get usernames and passwords, and especially an admin password, which is what they're looking for, they'll move across the network and eventually deploy a ransomware and demand a ransom for that. So that's why we need but there's a list of security controls that we need to prevent this, and some of that is fairly straightforward. Cyber insurance, if it does happen, is a good one. The good thing about cyber insurance, it comes with a list of controls for everybody, so making sure that they're in place. So if you have cyber insurance, the first thing that if you have an incident is they will ask you, is all of this in place and can you prove it? If it's not, your cyber insurance doesn't cover you. So your terms and conditions and the forms you fill out for cyber insurance, really important. Immutable backup guarantees you recover position. Old style backup won't be there. It will be deleted once they get admin permissions. Email and Office 365 security needs to be put in place so that we have a good level of protection there. MFA, timeouts, conditional access, and limiting access just to the device, not just username and password. MFA, endpoint protection kept up to date. We're preferring Microsoft Defender for endpoint, but there's a list of settings for that. So not all endpoint protection is equal. An endpoint protection that was top of the range 3 years ago is probably no longer fit for purpose. Security awareness training to keep the culture of cyber in an organization is really important. Secure remote access, away from VPN, MFA, and making sure it's zero trust based on devices, keeping everything up to date. Strong passwords in the last example, if somebody dumped a password that was 8 characters, they can crack that probably in minutes to an hour. If that's a 14-character password, it's up to years. So making sure that strong passwords are there to protect you, and then following a framework such as NIST. So there's quite a bit in that little list. We'll come up with number 10 shortly, but they're all relatively straightforward elements, but it's actually making sure they're in place. And hopefully today is actually knowing the why we need them in place. The why is because sorry, Karen, go on.
Sorry, Gary, I just think it's important to note that following a framework. So there's a lot of information here, and I'm sure a lot of people are kept awake at night worrying about cyber incidences, but you need a compass, you need some direction, and the framework so it gives the direction. So when you have the control, so Gary talked about, passwords, administrative passwords, having certain controls in place. When you follow a framework, like NIST or like Cyber Essentials, whatever it is, they all give a guide and a pointer to exactly this. So you align yourself to what's in this. So, you know, I think it can be an overwhelming when you're looking at all this information. But one thing we could take away is consider a framework for your business, and then it puts from a strategic perspective and at board level or whatever level, you're having that cyber conversation.
Yeah, and the framework is there for everybody if they just search NIST online. And it is, you don't have to be technical to follow it. So identify what you need to protect, put the protections in place. If there is, and once they're in place, then you monitor them, manage them, make sure there's a good recovery solution. We'll keep harping on about immutable backups, security protections, and a lot of these systems have a lot of security in them. They just need to be turned on and configured as well. So, and that's another one. But NIST will guide you through that process. And if we need to help you with that, we're happy to do that. End user identity and email is what's been attacked. So end user identity, which is attached to email, then has been attacked. I asked a question how old email was. So email in its current format is about 60 years old. So it's around since 1982 in the current format, but in general it's about 60 years old. It hasn't changed in the back end since 1980. So that's why a lot of the stuff, if we turn on elements in email on Office 365 Gmail, that has some legacy protocols or legacy connections that are older than some of us on the call, and probably older than a lot of us on the call. So email in itself is not secure. So we have to put extra security controls in place. So legacy connections need to be turned off if we don't need them. They're not turned off by default. So email as a security technology is old, and that's why it's easy to fake, and it is a security issue, and that's why cyber criminals use it all the time. These have covered this earlier. 75 and 92% of attacks are associated back to email. Email is an easy way in. Users do click on links. They do silly stuff, and that's just, and there's no technology out there that will completely protect you on email. So it's user education. It's the security controls turned on, but a lot of it is user education, because no matter what technical solution you put in place, if somebody clicks on the link, gives away username, password, MFA token, then they're in, unless you have the additional controls turned on. Email can easily be spoofed as well, and that's we've seen a lot of the most simple attacks. People lose money through invoice fraud, man-in-the-middle attacks, and lots of silly stuff around email. So email is a challenge that has to be sorted. The good news is the Microsoft 365 suite, formerly Office 365, currently has approximately about 350 million users and growing every day. It's a really big suite of tools. There is a lot of security controls in place, but they all need to be turned on, and they need to be kept up to date over time as well. So turn them on once. It's not practice, because it changes. Data suite, Gmail, Google, very similar. But since COVID, a lot of organizations have moved online using SharePoint and OneDrive for talking. So there is organizations that can work just from business into or business application. Security and data protection around making sure we provide secure access, have advanced protection turned on, and something we want to talk about today briefly as well is device management. So a lot of the stuff that we're into is being attacked. Protect that, but we also need to protect the device in case that identity does get compromised as well. The way is Microsoft Intune. So we've talked a little bit about Zero Trust. In order to protect the device, there's a technology called Microsoft Intune. In order to trust the device, we know Intune is on that device, which is part of the Office 365 suite, and it's a management tool for devices. If Intune is on your device, we log on to your organization, to only organization devices that are enrolled in Intune, and that's brilliant. So we can do that. That cuts out a lot of the bad things that can happen, and it means we can roll out a lot of extra configurations down onto the endpoint, and the endpoint security using Defender for endpoint. The device can be wiped if it goes lost or missing, and then there's about 100 security controls that get rolled out under Intune, what we call the device hardening. If I looked at a couple of cybersecurity forums, did one earlier today, and it did ask, did the organization have any device hardening configuration in place for the endpoints? Intune is the way to do that, and it's included in the licensing in Office 365.
And I think, Gary, this comes back to the fact that we're on the other side of the firewall, and we've used it at home, and having those controls in place are so important because we don't have visibility. So looking at the endpoint, making sure that we have the ability to lock it down, put those controls around that Gary talked about is becoming more and more important with remote working. And sorry, Peter, go ahead there.
Yeah, just to add to that, I suppose, and we've had many a discussion about it, but 2FA really now is sort of it's breakable, and we need to start moving for most organizations to 3FA, which is in our opinion the trusted device. So if you think and what we've been trying to do within our own customer base is move to implementing, especially for 365, implementing Intune with trusted device authentication. So that just means that if 2FA, it's just a new and higher level of security for customers that we think needs to be implemented.
Yeah, so it likens of you things like impossible login, geo-locking, the device somebody's trying to log in from another country, from the UK, but we have a policy in place that they can actually only log in from, particular IP address, from a country location. So you can get that granular, and the view being that, we want to put as many layers as possibly as we can in between the bad guys. So the zero trust model, then looking at to get to the specific Gary mentioned around deprecating VPN, like everybody's been using VPN, but that zero trust model now where we only allow somebody not to access a network, but only the application that they need on the network or specific service on that network, rather than opening up the whole thing. So we're looking to minimize the attack surface all the time.
And that's a good point, because VPN now it would be considered a legacy technology as well. So we need to move away from that. So that's something that's on that legacy technology list. So part of keeping everything up to date. We do realize that some people on the call today will only be getting this information for the first time, but we're happy to have discussions around that as well. So the piece then is, if we have Intune done on the device, we have Defender for endpoint, which is part of your Office 365 suite, which is a really good next generation endpoint security solution. We're starting to get that device into a really good place. So you can actually limit access now to your data to say, okay, it needs to be enrolled in Intune, it needs to have Defender, and everything needs to be up to date. Now we're getting to a stage, and not all organizations will go that level, but for the security conscious organizations, we can say, I only want trusted devices that are fully up to date, accessing my data. So, and that's where you start to sleep a little bit at night then, and you actually know that you're in a really good you're in a really good place. So that's the level that we want to get organizations to. It is a journey. It's a complete change. And to Darren's point is, we have to, number two, first thing we want to take away, mutable backups. That's a must. Second thing we want to take away is the security needs to move with the device. So everything that you need needs to now transition with the device. If you're an organization that it has remote working and is doing both work from home and the office, the firewall is moving more towards an edge device. So we're not using it for a VPN, where it's pretty much it's an intelligent edge device. You still need it, but it's not the same functionality as it would have had a couple of years ago. So things are changing, and evolvement in cybersecurity threats and everything else is forcing those changes, and the industry is adapting towards it. So we have to kind of keep up to date. So there's a couple of different types of Defender. So we've got Defender for the endpoint, does quite a lot. So it covers the endpoint. There's about 100 security controls that pushes down onto the endpoint, turns off a lot of older legacy pieces, puts in a solution called attack surface reduction, gives the view on any threats and vulnerabilities on those devices, and it gives us a better view of the asset. So there's quite a lot Defender for endpoint and Intune can do together. And in conjunction with that, then we've got Defender for Office 365, which needs to be turned on. It'll be there with your business premium license, but if it's not configured, it's not going to work. So we need safe. It looks at attachments, it looks at links, it looks at documents. It still won't catch everything, but it will catch a good bit. So we do pair it with another email filtering solution as well. So because email is a legacy system, and what we see sometimes is an email can come in with a link in it, and that link is not bad on its way in, but soon as it's in, within 10 minutes, the link can be changed. The link doesn't change, but the back end of where the link goes to changes to something else. So it can be scanned, it can be fine, it can come in, it can change. So there's lots of stuff. We need intelligence in terms of the back end systems as well. So there's a lot of stuff on the Office 365 plans. And the reason we're covering these is we're covering the endpoint, we're covering email. Email is the way in for quite a lot of stuff. Security score on Office 365 allows you to monitor. If you log onto your Office 365 dashboard, if you are using Office 365, then you can see what your security score is. It's a nice, easy metric to use. So it covers multiple areas. It covers your identity. How are we protecting our identity? How are we protecting our device? This piece around device won't show up unless you have Defender for Endpoint and push down onto the devices, because you don't have visibility of the devices until that gets turned on. So this is what we suggest most organizations use, as when we talk about the policy piece, we talk about the process and the security controls, and then with oversight, this is an oversight piece, and we need to have all four turned on. And Microsoft will give recommendations for each of these as it looks at your tenant, looks at your devices, looks at your data, and this needs to be kept up to date all the time. So just have a question there from Jessica about the use of Outlook on personal devices. If you can't secure the device, you can't secure the data. So if you have users coming in, and this is a COVID piece as well, that anyone that could get laptops and devices give away the laptop, allow people in on their own devices. But in our opinion, unless we can secure the device, we can't secure the data. So we'd like to get Defender down onto those devices, and we want to restrict access to Office 365 and the data only to those trusted devices. So it would mean that we wouldn't be allowing or recommending to allow the data down onto the devices. But it depends on the industry and the business you're in as well.
As a minimum requirement, in a Microsoft environment, we would still like to have the Intune agent, and sometimes if someone leaves the organization, we need to have the ability to pull that configuration away from the personal phone. Now, there is a technical way of actually doing that within Microsoft at the minute on that particular example, but essentially, and again, it goes back to regulation, for a business, they need to be able to control their data. If it's on a personal device, that can't happen, essentially.
Oh, thanks, Peter. So yeah, if it depends on the business, depends on the data, but there is security controls for mobiles. Prefer not to have it on laptops, but it depends on that. So if you have questions on that, Jessica, just ping them into us afterwards, and we'll give you some advice on it. So security score for identity. This was one of the 4. These are some controls around it. Is making sure MFA is in place. So what we'd like to see is strong passwords and MFA. We think MFA is no longer what it used to be, but it still needs it's still a requirement. It's still better to have it than not have it. All the older stuff like legacy stuff, we mentioned email, around since the 80s. Some of the stuff like the older way to connect email is still turned on by default. We would like to get all that turned off. Password policies, we want to have strong password policies. Essentially, we're moving towards not expiring passwords. If they're a good password and they're 14 characters long, we don't want them. If you're running an 8-character password, then not so good. We'd like to move that up. User risk policies can be turned on. That means if the system detects that there's a user risk and there's an extra license required for this, it's not included in the business premium. But if a user risk or something bad is detected happening, the system can automatically lock it down. It's an extra license, well worth the money, well worth putting in. So user risk and sign-in risk protection, something that can. So there's a lot of functionality in here that doesn't get turned on. So administrator roles. We've seen an issue last week where an Office 365 account got compromised. There were full admin, what's called a global admin. That means they got access to a lot of stuff that they shouldn't have had access because that user should not have been logging on. So they gave away everything with the one piece. So it's a good piece. And then self-service password, easy to set up. Policies, not allowing access to applications. If users can actually just cyber criminals will use applications and application access to get access to data on a persistent basis. So if you allow an application access to your data in Office 365, you give it once, it's there forever until you turn it off. You change your password, there's no requirement for MFA, so it's an easy way of getting around. So consent policies, turning that off, much easier than leaving it on. And if a user needs an application to get access to their 365, then it should be a request and get approved and get looked at. So there's a little bit in there, but security score is really good. That's just the identity piece. And if we look at the previous slides, we've got identity, data, device, and apps. We won't go through them all in detail, but if you do go down through them, data has data classifications, encryption, access controls. There's some advanced stuff around labeling, so you can label a document. If it's really sensitive, you can label it. Then it can't be shared outside the organization. It can't be printed. There's lots of stuff. If somebody takes that document and saves it onto a USB stick, when they go to log on, it checks their username and password. Is it still active in the organization? Do they still have permission to the document? And if they don't, it won't allow them access to that document. So there's a lot of clever stuff in Office 365, not used by default, but really, really good stuff. We're concentrating on identity and the devices today because they're the two big things. So making sure the devices are kept up to date, that they've security configurations around firewalls, antivirus, device encryption, such as BitLocker, patch management, they're kept up to date. Small number of vulnerabilities that every piece of software. And when we look at patch management and keeping everything up to date, it has to include not just your operating system, but it needs to include the applications that sit on the devices. It needs to include the equipment in the comms room, the switches, the firewalls, everything needs to be kept up to date. Mobile device management could have been the question earlier on, but there is ways that we can put Intune down onto a device, or we can tie down the device. There's mobile application management, mobile device management. There's a lot of stuff that can be done there, and access controls, and then compliance, making sure everything is up to date. So there's quite a bit in terms of the device. So there's 101, that was the question that was in the chat earlier on, 101 recommended security controls or security configurations for managing a Windows device using Intune and Defender. So it's quite a lot, and making sure they're all up to date puts you in a really good place. Applications we covered a little bit, making sure that we're tight on what applications we allow access to the system, making sure they're all kept up to date, and making sure we can turn on that only trusted applications are allowed as well. So there's a good bit 58 controls around applications, And these are all just different elements of that security posture using your 365 piece. Zero trust is what we're looking to get to. That's only allowing access from trusted user coming in from a trusted device and making sure the device is up to date. Then we're in a good place. This was a question from earlier on, and I'm going to finish up shortly to give you a couple of times because I see there's a couple of questions there. But I think most people got that right. So when we looked at it, it was 80%. Always verify user and device before granting access. That's not been the case up to now. The case up to now is if you have a username, password, and an MFA token you were getting in. We have to move away from that. So continuous improvement using some of the elements we've gone through will put you in a really good place. Now today we covered a lot of stuff, so the next day we might break it down into different sections. We'll work with Karen on that. But if there is any questions, and I see there is a few.
Yeah, Jessica had a question in there. With the upgrades of Windows 11, we have upgraded a lot of our computers and have a lot of bunch of computers we need to recycle. I know hard drives need to be destroyed, not wiped, correct? Is there anything else we should do in terms of securing that data?
I'll take that one. Yeah, sorry, Gary.
No, you're good.
To answer your questions, we're jumping in there. So, few things to consider if you're using OneDrive or SharePoint. If you've got any cloud services connected with that, you're backing that up as well. Some of the things that we've seen is that that may not be considered, and when destroying the hard drives, ensuring that whatever company you're using are compliant, GDPR compliant, or ISO 2700 regulated, and that they're giving you a certificate. So not too much more. You're saying you're going to destroy the hard drives, which you're getting rid of the data. Just making sure, I suppose, unlinking any accounts or any license that you have associated to it. Sometimes that can be a challenge also.
And there is organizations out there that will securely destroy those. Some shred the devices, some and they'll come on site and do that. Yeah.
And we'll give you a cert to say, and
exactly.
it really depends the actual industry that you're in. That I do know certain industries require that cert to be issued. We also have a question in there from Kevin. He basically describing that he secures down access to servers via a client. He feels that could be very invasive to install endpoint management on employee phones, laptops that don't have sensitive data in general. So I suppose I could take that one, and maybe Darren can come in on the back of it. I suppose what an organization needs to do is sort of state in the IT policy what their security control is. And I think across industry, it actually does change, but as there is no right or wrong way. The way I would think on this stuff, it's more that recommended best practice is followed, and I suppose what we try and do is, as Gary stated before, is look to a framework like NIST that you can align to put in these technologies and controls. I don't know, have you any?
I'll have a little bit on that. So if there's no sensitive data in terms of PII data, so on those devices, then that's not an issue. But most organizations, even in email, have a lot of data and a lot of sensitive data going around via email. And we've seen data protection commissioner hand out significant fines in the last couple of years for organizations that didn't protect email and lost control of data through going off onto different devices. So we have to be very careful of what systems they have access to. You can protect devices without going to being too invasive. So we mentioned mobile device management. That's an agent down onto the machine and phone. There's a mobile application management where you can limit what they can do, and that means they can't save documents down onto the phone. they can't take screenshots. So there is solutions, but I would always err on the side of caution, because under the GDPR, you have to keep a record of processing activity. You have to see what data you're processing, and most organizations have more sensitive data going in and out email, around payroll, around HR, around different elements than what they think. So it's a good discussion, and it's an organizational based discussion, because not every organization is equal, and depending on what you do, it is. But your controls around access to servers is really good, Kevin. So, but yeah, on the making sure the same level of access is everywhere, it's good.
We have another question in there. Just your view on single sign-on. Will single sign-on be an enabler for cyber criminals to get access to all applications?
If it's not combined with zero trust, yes. So you have to, when you're doing single sign-on, you have to bring the security element into it around zero trust, or else if you give someone single sign-on to all their applications just built on the identity in 365 and an MFA token, then essentially you've given away everything very quickly.
So there definitely needs to be, before any of that happens, a probably plan around the single sign-on security that's at the start of the conversation. So we have one more question there in from Daniel. How does the Purview compliance score compare to the security score in Defender? Is 80% the gold standard number in Purview 2 for functional security?
Sorry, Gary, go ahead.
No, you go ahead, Darren. You're good.
Yeah, no, just that. So they're measured in different ways, with the focus, I suppose, being on data loss protection and data. So and the labeling. So the insider risk regulatory mapping. So they're scored sort of differently in relation to. So very much the primary focus for the secure score is security posture, and then the Purview is around regulatory and compliance posture.
If you can get to 80% on both, you're doing really well. And if you can do the security score first, prioritize that, and then move over to the Purview. And Purview is what's, so security score is probably the basic elements of security, and then you're getting into the more advanced elements then after that, which is a really good place to be working on. We've one other question in from Jessica in terms of AI. Does Nostra recommend AI for business to use or look into? So I'll take that one. It's primarily where AI, there's an AI Act that came in February, I think. So if you're using AI for business, you need to know what data it's accessing and have an AI policy, and making sure there's controls around AI. AI is a little bit like cloud. It's not all good. So there's a good few businesses that have gone out of business in the last 6 months that were positioned as AI businesses, but they weren't truly AI. So we're seeing a lot of flux in that market. Nostra is back in Copilot and the Microsoft AI piece at the moment, but before turning that on, you have to make sure that the security around users have access to data they shouldn't have access by incorrect permissions and everything else, because the AI agent will go off and find it. So AI and Copilot, there's 2 different versions of Copilot. There's a free version and there's the paid version. But for the most part, Copilot, especially on the paid version, was limited to your data in your own tenant, which is a much safer way of doing it. So, and where a lot of organizations are asking us to block other types of AI at the moment. I realize we're just gone out of time, so we'll probably finish up there. But AI is probably it's our biggest enabler and our biggest threat at the moment. So it's been used against us, and but it's a huge enabler. And if we combine, one of the things we like talking about is the combination of AI and automation. AI on its own is not the end all of everything, but if we can use AI to do better automation, then it's a game changer for most organizations.
Yeah, I think the key thing to ask, maybe to wrap it up then, is your AI readiness. So who's using AI in your company. So, you know, if somebody's using ChatGPT, are they uploading sensitive data up to it? So are people using Gemini? So create your policy. So what's your policy on who's allowed to use what? And then what can the AI potentially see? And they're the key things to understand, because of course it's like a supervillain and a superhero. Everybody wants to use it, and we feel like we're behind the curve. But to plan it and stage it out and ensure that it's not seen something that it shouldn't.
We have one other question from Declan around Google Gmail platform can be meta security as Microsoft 365, because it doesn't have the ability to get down onto the device, and where we are a Microsoft focused organization. Our opinion is probably not as secure as a 365 platform, Declan, but we might be slightly biased in that as well. So, but because with 365 we can secure the data based on having good knowledge that the device is up to date, the identity is the right identity, is tied to that device, then we can give access. We think that is the advantage on that.
Yeah.
Just one question there around AI just quickly is that there is governance included in the paid version for Copilot, and it's incredibly secure. So if somebody's asking in terms of security around AI, that we recommend AI Business for. So it's ensuring that the data is secure and encrypted, and Copilot is one of the ones that can offer that.
Thank you everyone for your time today. So we'd probably look to work with the chamber. We'll probably run more focused events in one particular area. But again, thanks for joining us today.
Yeah.
If you've any questions, Peter Galligan, peter.galligan@nostra.ie is based here in the Galway office with the rest of us, so he's happy to take any questions or any follow-up, or you can go back through Karen in the chamber as well, and she'll pass on the contact details for all the guys here. So thanks again, everybody, and hopefully see you soon in a future webinar.